record. Wonderful. All right. Okay. All right, Tyler, let's get into this. So, welcome everyone. Once again, this is Tech Talk. This is actually our very first episode, but we've actually had a couple different attempts. I am here right now with a good friend of mine I've gotten to know over the past couple of months. His name is Tyler Pounds, and he is a man of the Shawnee Nation. So thank you so much for joining me again, Tyler. I know we've been acquainted already, but this is a very important thing, and we've had some issues. But I thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
I'm doing good, Connery. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a very peaceful day. We've been dealing with a couple of fires. I think one's coming from Canada, so the sky is all ashy today, and it's not as beautiful as I'd like it to be. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So, Tyler, as you know, Tech Talk, the whole point of this entire deal is to show that every culture in the world has a story. And you and me both coming from a wildlife biology background, this is also what we're going to be talking about, traditional ecological knowledge. That is what we all know as tech. And then there, of course, is LEK, which you have told me about before, which is local ecological knowledge. So I want to start by asking you the difference between the two for our viewers. May you go ahead into that?
Yes. So traditional ecological knowledge, and I will begin with that. So TEK, also known as traditional ecological knowledge, is mainly long-term ecological knowledge, and it could be any for any species. Uh, I like to say species in question because, certain indigenous peoples who live along the coastline near the oceans are going to have knowledge about the oceans and about marine oceanic life. If you're living up in the mountains, you'll probably have more knowledge about mountainous plants and animals. So it's essentially 300 years or more, if you've lived in a particular environment or a particular ecosystem for 300 or more years, most scientists consider, that family or that tribe or that community to have knowledge about the localized environment. Um, Now, localized ecological knowledge is a little bit different. That's generally short-term ecological knowledge. Um, there isn't, there has a, they just say anything less than 300 years. If a people or if a family or if a tribe or if an individual has lived in a particular localized region or area for less than 300 years, then then it gets redesignated as LEK. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. One thing, of
Mhm.
course, I was always interested in is, of course, so I come from a couple of different backgrounds myself, such as, of course, African ancestry and even Native American ancestry. We have at least one known member in my family who we believe to be of the Cherokee tribe, but we still need to dig a little bit more into that kind of information. I'd like to ask you about the ecological knowledge, or just simply just your story, about where you're from and your tribe and anything that you'd like to share with our audience about your tale and how you got into wildlife.
Yeah. So I grew up on my grandparents' farm in in Greenville, Ohio. So Greenville, Ohio is one of the original tribal towns for the Shawnee Nation. I was born and raised, well, I was born in Dayton, Ohio, which is where my father and my father's family lived. And then my mother's family lived in Greenville and Piqua and Xenia, Ohio. All of that area is the original tribal towns of the Shawnee Nation. So I grew up my grandparents' farm in Ohio during the summertime. And so I was raised in the traditional homelands of the Shawnee Nation. Um, Most of the Shawnees were removed to Oklahoma, and some of them went up into Canada. Tecumseh is actually buried in Canada, up near the Delaware Reserve. Um, but I was fortunate enough to be raised in our traditional homelands. And I also remember growing up, um, the Shawnee Nation. My grandparents taught me that we were born from the Serpent Mound. And there is a famous Serpent Mound in Ohio from the Ohioan mound builder culture. And so the Shawnee Nation is one of the tribes in the U.S. that's descended from that mound building culture. We had To my knowledge, that I am aware of, we originally had like 12 different clans. We had the Panther clan, we had the what we call the Four Hoof clan, which is a horse. We have a Swan clan, we have a Turkey clan, we have a Serpent clan. We had like over 12 different clans. And I know the Shawnee. We are Southern Sac and Foxes. We are Meskwaki. We are Southern Sac and Foxes, and it's important to note that I descend from Tecumseh's band of Shawnee specifically, and Tecumseh's band of Shawnee was a lot different from the other Shawnees because we used to travel into the southeastern U.S. and we used to go stomp dancing with the Creeks and with the Choctaws and with the Seminoles and with those people. And actually, Tecumseh was born in what would be modern day Alabama. He was born during the wintertime migration route that my people had. Um, So it would have been Corn and Stalk's band of Shawnee. And we were unique in that we were a lot different from the other Sac and Foxes because we were the only band of Shawnee that would go into the southeastern US and trade with the southeastern Indians and go stomp dancing. That's why our band stomp dances. Um, with the other southeastern Indians because we actually historically did do that. Um, yes, is there anything else you want to know about it specifically?
Well, of course, I want to know, how you go through everyday life with all the lessons that you learn. And, do you like to share anything like outside, when you're just on a regular day, you're going for like a walk or, you're just with friends or so. What lessons do you use the most of your family and your history, in everyday life? And with everything that we've been going through already in this country today, and especially with all these losses, like you already know as well as I do, that our field is having a pretty tough time. How do you think the wildlife field could be more inclusive with your story, with your lessons, and everything that you want to pass on to your family as well? I understand that you have a daughter now, correct? And
Yes, that matter. Mhm.
yeah, what kind of world would you like to see her grow up in, relating with wildlife and tech and lek, but just in general, what do you hope to see in the future?
Well, this is what I would like to see, and I know at this current time that what I am about to say is going to be extremely unpopular with the academics. However, it needs to be done, and if it's um so I'll just go ahead and tell you. Um, the wildlife conservation um field has got to change. Um, we need to quit only using one field. And what I mean by that is most wildlife conservationists are set up, and this um, is also mainly only true in the US, but in the US, most academics are trained to stay within the confines of one field or one box. They don't like using interdisciplinary fields.
Hmm.
They don't like including other fields. Unfortunately, we're living in a time called the Anthropocene, and humans are driving um, like 99.5% of the world's ecological degradation. You're not going to be able to solve the wildlife crisis with just one field because guess what? The Anthropocene and global climate change spans about 40 different fields simultaneously, all at once. Do you really think that you're going to be able to solve the wildlife crisis with just one field when it spans over 40 different fields all at once simultaneously?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I'm on your side 100% with that. There are so many things in the wildlife field that, people, some people forget to connect the dots here and there. I mean, some people I like to ask this question a lot. What does being a biologist actually mean? We all know biology just means the study of life, but there's so many different paths to life, so many different ways to go about life. I mean, you have mycology, you get the study of fungi, and, that plays a key role in a lot of ecosystems. You got enterology, which is sort of like another way to study amphibians. It's like another term for studying amphibians, but a lot of people group them in herpetology. So, like when you're going hiking with friends, you want to go look for reptiles, they say, let's go herping. That somehow includes amphibians as well. So that was kind of weird, but you know what? I respect it. I've done that myself as well. I found a three-striped poison frog in Peru once. That was absolutely beautiful. But everything has a purpose. They teach you that in The Lion King all the time. Most people don't even think about when you watch a movie. Just, I'm going to make this brief, but when you watch a movie, any kind of movie, whether it's animated or whether it's live action or a documentary, if many of them have animals included in it, many of them talk about, the spirit of nature or just the spirit of life. And you got to really listen when you're watching those movies. You got to watch them more than once, actually, to really get what's going on because there are subtle messages that they're trying to tell you. But most people just want to look at the entertainment side. Sure, that's
Yeah.
fair. I mean, it is entertaining,
Yeah.
but that's only half of it. You got to look at the other half.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess to answer the other half of your question too,
Hmm.
is I am a ethnobiologist,
Hmm.
and ethnobiology is the only legitimate field of biology that is under the scope and practice of another field, anthropology. Now, I also do have a graduate minor in fish and wildlife ecology, and I have worked as a fish and wildlife technician on and off over the years, and I've done a lot of different jobs for a lot of different organizations, for zoos, for nonprofits. So I have plenty of experience. I also grew up on my grandparents' farm. I started taking care of animals when I was 5. I started riding horses when I was 4. I started growing a garden when I was like 4 to 5, but almost everything in ethnobiology and indigenous science and TEK and LEK is you learn by doing. So we generally don't learn this in a classroom. We learn it when we're kids growing up, actually doing it, hands-on in the real world. We don't go to college for it. We don't go to school for it. So by the time we get in college, we already have 20 plus years experience doing it on average, generally speaking. So it's kind of reverse of the traditional Western paradigm of science. And that I think it's probably one of the biggest hurdles that Western science is going to face because it's also been my experience that most Western academics have ego issues. They have ego problems. When I was going through college, I can't tell you how many professors, unfortunately, that I had that would just walk up into a classroom and be like, "Well, I am Doctor So and So, and you should address me like this." And I'm like, "Dude, I already got 20 years experience on you, bro. Like." I mean, you probably just learned this in a classroom. I started doing this crap when I was 4 years old. So by the time I got up in here, I already got 20 plus years experience. And so that's what Western science needs to address is they need to quit being so ego driven and they need to change their attitude and
Hmm.
start respecting these people because if they don't start respecting these people, they're not going to get nothing done. And that is half of the battle right there.
You're telling me I've had a couple of egotistical professors in the past myself. I won't name them because I'm sure they're gonna probably I don't know, they'll probably try to track me down, but no, I'm kidding. But no, it's something I think about quite often. We're always taught to show respect to our elders, of course. And of course I do, 100%. But you know, having respect, like if you want people to respect you, you need to show the same amount of respect to them in return, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what, maybe they have done, of course. You have to acknowledge it, not just respect it. You need to acknowledge that person. I mean, if you've seen the Avatar movies, if James Cameron Avatar, when they say the words "I see you," well, that has a big meaning. It really does. Why am I bringing it up? Well, I do love the franchise, but I will say that watching those movies, it does kind of reflect sort of it reflects like a little bit of those themes right there. Here's this native indigenous group. Here are these crazy military people coming to colonize, this group. But they are so in tune with nature that they really teach us what we should be doing, just on the basic level of life. And, so respect is one thing, but I feel like, but acknowledgement is another. So, truly, I think that should be a core value in itself. I mean, I come from a high school where we had six core values. Respect is one of them, but acknowledgement was never on that board. If I had to add a seventh one, it would definitely be acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, and actually, if we want to talk about acknowledgement, this will be the final piece to TEK and LEK that I'll talk about with you.
Sure.
It's also important to like realize the different types of peoples who might hold TEK and LEK because they're going to be different. So, like, as far as traditional ecological knowledge goes, 80% of the world's biodiversity and this natural resources is being specifically conserved and managed by indigenous peoples and their TEK knowledges. So, think of like TEK as like I mean, this isn't always the case because there are farmers that have lived on a farm for over 300 years, but like the vast majority of most TEK knowledge is going to be from indigenous peoples. And then LEK, the vast majority of like LEK knowledge, which is the other 20% of the world's biodiversity, is mainly going to be held by like more modern everyday people, but they have probably have been doing these lifeways for like over 100 plus years. So like fishermen, modern day fishermen, like a lot of the modern day deep sea fishermen, their like grandpa was doing that, or their great grandpa started doing that. And so for like the past 100 to 150 years, their whole family's been doing it. or like maybe a modern day hunter, or like a modern day fisher, or like a modern day scientist, like a Western scientist. So those are going to be the people who mainly hold LEK knowledge, which is any knowledge about the localized ecosystem or environment. But the knowledge is less than 300 years old. Um, And so put 80 plus 20 together, and there's your 100% of the world's biodiversity right there. Um, and I am currently writing a book, attempting to standardize TEK and LEK knowledges because no one has been able to do it. And I think a part of the big problem is no one is skilled enough to use integrated biology. No one is skilled enough to really, take on something as massive as that. Because it is massive, which is why my book is going to be over 400 pages long. Um, but anyways, getting back to, the indigenous and the farming ways of life, because I come from both indigenous and a farming community, you know, both indigenous peoples and farmers, we see everything as being intertwined. We see everything as being one. We don't really separate um like the plants and the animals and our cultural day-to-day activities because it's kind of intertwined. I mean, you could even use that on a farm. Think about on a traditional farm, right? You wake up in the morning and then you go out to the animals and then you feed the animals and you feed the cows and you feed the horses and you feed the chickens. And then afterwards you hop in the tractor and then you go out into the cornfield or you start plowing your crops. So everything is kind of intertwined. Everything is kind of related in that way. And that's kind of going back to what I was saying about the academics liking to separate things. Farmers and indigenous peoples, we don't separate things. We see things as one and the same. And which is kind of why, like, I guess I'm into integrated biology because that's like the one field that is also like ecology, that says everything is actually intertwined, everything is one and the same. Um, and and yeah, and so is ethnobiology because in the field of ethnobiology, it's a true cross between anthropology and human culture and wildlife biology, and it acknowledges that human culture interfaces with nature and wildlife, and you can't have one without the other. And ethnobiology, integrated biology, and ecology can be used for any species in the world. It doesn't matter whether it's a microbial life form in microbiology, it doesn't matter whether it's an animal life form in zoology, it doesn't matter whether it's a botanical life form in botany, it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, I mean, anything really in the oceans, anything. Um, and so I guess what I'm trying to explain, because it's very difficult for me to explain this to Westerners, is um, most of our knowledge about the environment can be applied universally to everything because we recognize that everything is intertwined, everything is related, and you can't have one without the other. And so when you go back to science, those kinds of teachings are almost exclusively interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, ad hoc type of research, and most universities and most scientific programs, they're just not geared for such interdisciplinary types of research. And to be quite frank, I I think I think the US has fallen behind on the times when it comes to the sciences because the most cutting edge high tech research is being conducted with interdisciplinary programs, you know. And I just don't see most US universities, being interdisciplinary like that. So I think that, having scientific programs for fish and wildlife, they for the future, they need to become more interdisciplinary and kind of that to me is going to be how they become more inclusive because we're going into a time where everything is going extinct, everything is dying off. And if you think about it, even if you're like a botanist, well, even if you're a botanist, what eats those plants? The animals eat those plants. So those animals might go extinct with those plants.
Right.
And where and so you can see how that cascading effect could happen. And that's kind of what I'm saying is indigenous peoples, we realize that everything is intertwined like that. And so I think focusing on just one field exclusively at this point is the way of the past. And people kind of need to look towards the future in order to save all of nature. We're just going to have to become more interdisciplinary with our research paradigms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my friend, I'm so grateful for our conversation today. We're actually kind of out of time,
Mhm.
but for the last couple of minutes that we do have, it's giving me like a countdown. Is there any like last words or last messages that you would like to say?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can feel free to email me if you like to reach me on your email. It's going to be Tyler Pounds 1989 at iCloud.com. Tyler Pounds 1989 at iCloud.com. You can also reach me on my cell phone, area code 918-822-5068. Again, that's area code 918-822-5068. And I've also written a book series called Integrated Human Nature Relations. And the book series Integrated Human Nature Relations can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, pretty much all over the world. Um, Foils in London, Waterstones in London, all over the world. So I really appreciate you guys listening to me today.
Yeah, and thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'll be posting this a little bit later. You'll be able to find this on YouTube, as well as LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, TikTok as well. I'll be posting to all those platforms. You can find me on Instagram at C Scott Wildlife. You can also find me at Facebook. My full name is Connery Scott. So come find me there. You can also email me at cscottwildlife@gmail.com. If you would like to be a guest on this show, I welcome all kinds of guests, both local and international. And the goal, of course, for this podcast is that every culture has a story. So Tech Talk is not just about the traditional ecological knowledge or just ecological knowledge in general about just biology, but it's also about you. That is what all of this is about. It's about you and your story so that you have a chance to be heard wherever you might be in the world. And if you especially have a big interest in wildlife and the planet, let's talk about that together. So Tyler, thank you so much again for being here with me today. It was a joy having to talk with you. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this whole thing. I know it's been kind of a mess for the last couple of months trying to get this whole thing together, but I believe we got this down now. This we've gotten the recording good. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much, Connery, and I hope you have a good rest of your month, okay?
Absolutely. You too. You too. All
All
right
right.
then. All
All
right.
right.
Have a good day, man. All right. Bye-bye.